Hey everyone, welcome to the round 12 fantasy and supercoach preview for the NRL. Look, we haven't done this in a few weeks, so we're going to do a little bit of a refresher. We're going to go through the teams for this weekend. We're going to go through both NRL and fantasy in terms of the rules for the big buy rounds just before Origin, rounds 13, 16, and 19. And also we're going to go through some cash cows, who to trade in, who not to trade in. And I think to finish off, I've got a couple of resources that I've got when I posted on Twitter for Wiki, and essentially like things to help you out throughout the buy round. So if you guys are playing for head to head, this might not be, or like it'll still be helpful in terms of who to trade it out. But a lot of the strategic stuff that I'm going to discuss is for overall players. I'm lucky enough that I'm sort of ranked pretty well in NRL Fantasy and sort of ranked okay in Supercoach, and I love the Origin buy round because it creates chaos. And a lot of people, usually give up around this time because it's Origin. You might not be ranked that well, and people. It's actually the best time to play Supercoach and fantasy because you find out where you're truly ranked. When a lot of people give up, the buy rounds hit, people forget to do your teams. Bang, that's where you got the ranks. And especially if you're in like leagues with your mates or whatever, and you are playing head to head, that's cool. This is the time to make sure that you're doing a team. It only takes a couple of minutes a week. But if you get in now, a lot of your mates are getting lazy and you're going to get yourself up the table. But anyways, guys, I'll get into it. So my name's Nakul. I'm the founder of Wiki. We do all things punting, fantasy, data, everything for sport. We specialize in rugby league and cricket. A lot of the content that we do is around rugby league. And it's obviously a very nice time of the year with Origin coming up in a couple of weeks. As always, guys, you're on our Linktree. So if you just Google Wiki Linktree, you'll find this page in front of you. It hasn't been updated because I'm obviously doing the podcast just now, but we're going to start doing fantasy supercoach podcast, a punting podcast, both for rugby league, and a cricket podcast where we either talk about whatever cricket's going on around the world. Obviously, the IPL is going on around now. You got the Ashes coming up, and obviously every single T20 comp. And we're going to start interviewing people for our podcast as well. So a whole bunch of content coming up with Wiki. All you've got to do is just Google Wiki Linktree. You'll see this. You can follow us on socials here, which would be amazing because we do everything for free. So we really appreciate your support. And our Discord, we've almost got 2,000 people on there. Discord, if you don't know what it is, it's just like a chat app basically where you can discuss all things punting, fantasy, everything, footy, all things sport. We've got like 10 other sports now that you can discuss on there as well. So anyways, guys, I will get straight into it because there's a lot to go through. So first things first, team news. I'm going to try to get through as quickly as possible, but Thursday night, Broncos Panthers. This should be an absolute cracking game. Unfortunately, Adam Reynolds is out, which probably makes the which makes the Panthers pretty strong favourites because they've looked really good. I think they put 48 points on the Roosters. I think that was last week from memory. But anyways, Reynolds is out, which means Madden is in. I would not consider Madden because Reynolds is obviously just out for the week. Aside from that, not too much else. It's going to be really interesting to see what you do with Haas, Cleary, Carrigan, guys like this over the Origin period, but that's something for another time. Moving on, Dragons, Hook's been hooked, so they've got a new coach, which has made a few changes. So Little's back in at hooker, Lomax is back in the centres, and hopefully Frankie Molo can get back in. And unfortunately for him, Mbai's out, but I know a lot of the fans wanted him out, so that might be good. And Sullivan's on the bench, and hopefully he gets some time in the halves. With the Roosters, it's weird. They've gone with Egan Butcher and Tupanua starting in the second row, and they've got Butcher and Crichton on the bench. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they actually line up like this. The big talking point is Billy Smith for the Roosters. He's maintained his spot. NRL fantasy players, I didn't realize how good he's been. He scored 60 2 weeks in a row. Last week was obviously, it was against the Panthers without a try in both weeks. Ridiculous. We'll discuss whether he's a good buy a bit later on. And Joey Manu, sorry. Yeah, I forgot Joey Manu's out. So Suwali, I assume, will play right centre, but sorry, no, from the halves. That's right, Hutchinson. So yeah, Manu's out, and so is Sammy Walker, unfortunately. So Drew Hutchison is going to be playing the halves. This should be a really interesting game. The Roosters have been really, not really bad, but they've been poor the last few weeks. The Dragons have lost 6 straight, and obviously their coach has just been sacked. Anything could happen in this game, and I reckon if anything, the Dragons might sneak an upset here. This should be interesting. Rabbitohs, Eels. So Tom Burgess was ruled out like 5 minutes before their game last week because of a think it was a back spasm, and he is still out. They've also lost Jed Cartwright. He had a really bad concussion last week. So that forward pack, Tola, Sele, Murray, Arrow, Knight, Fafita, it's still all right. They've got a lot of depth. They've still got Havili to come back in as well, and I think I'm missing someone. But Para, Sean Lane out, hammy 6 to 8 weeks, unfortunately. So Cartwright and Davey starting on the edges, then with Maddo on the bench. It's going to be really interesting to see how they go. I think definitely the Rabbitohs should be favourites, and they are for this one. Sharks and Knights, McInnes out, broke hand about a month or so. I think he's out. ULA is on the extended bench. If he makes it in, that could be interesting for that Sharks pack. To have ULA, Hunt, Kafusi, a lot of power in that pack. But to be honest, the Knights have done a pretty good job as well with their pack, and Safidi brothers, Brazil playing really well. I think he scored like 4 tries in the full games that he's played. Pretty ridiculous stats. And the Knights were electric last week. I think they were trailing the Titans at halftime, and then Ponga just went bang bang in the second half. Whereas the Sharks probably should have put should have put Manly to the sword and couldn't do so. So this is going to be a really interesting game to watch, I reckon. Tigers, and they only conceded about 20 points to the Rabbitohs last week. So they've actually been decent the last few weeks. Whereas the Cowboys, they did have a good win against the Roosters a couple of weeks ago. I forgot how they went last week, but they generally started looking a lot better as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. Tanua Brown is out for the Cowboys off their bench. It leaves their bench as like a rookie second rower. I think they're both rookie second rowers, someone who used to play edge and now is playing the middle, and then Granville, who's had to play pretty much everywhere. And the Gashevsky scored 2 tries in 2 games. So their starting pack is decent, but their bench is really weak, to be honest. Whereas the Tigers have Offengawa and 12 playing decently off the bench. And then Simcoe and Kapoa doing okay as well. And their starting pack is reasonable too. So I think, weirdly enough, I think at the backs you can see that they've got the Cowboys probably match up a bit better, but yeah, this should be another interesting game of 2 teams that I don't really rate, to be honest, at the moment. Dolphins, they got a few players back. So they got Jesse Bromwich, potentially Mark Nichols, he's 18th man at the moment, Ray Stone, Edric and Branko Lee. Branko's playing, sorry, but Edric isn't. But anyways, Dolphins are pretty much full strength now in terms of what they can be with Sean O'Sullivan, sorry, injured long term. The Storm, it'll be interesting to see if Sofa Solomona does play. He hurt his ribs pretty badly last week. But anyways, this is going to be a cracking game. With Dolphins, they're playing the Storm. They're playing at home. Last game before Origin, they're coming off the bye. Yeah, they're coming off the bye. And there's a whole storyline around Munster. He was meant to, well, he was things between him and Wayne Bennett were a little bit awkward after he said no to the Dolphins and stayed at the Storm. And he said he hadn't called him after and all that kind of stuff. So this is going to be a really, really good game in terms of storylines. Dogs, Titans, Franklin Pele is out, but Addo Carr's back. Ryan Sutton, is he on the extended? Yeah, he's on the extended bench. I think with Addo Carr especially, and they've committed now to Olapu starting, I think this could be a little bit of a fresh change for the Dogs. We'll see how that goes. And Titans, they looked okay against the Knights, and then obviously Ponga just went nuts at the end. But their team's looking okay as well. But I think these 2 teams, I don't think they're going to be top 8 at the end of the year. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they fare. And then last game of the round before Origin, or last game for the full NRL round and of this round 12, Raiders Manly. All things were pointing to the Raiders until Jake Turbo got named. So I think now it's actually a pretty interesting matchup. So Manly's got, I'm not going to count Aaron Woods at this stage of his career as a big out, but Aloai and Tuolangi. Tuolangi's been playing left edge. Aloai has obviously been pretty impressive in the last season or 2 generally for Manly, but they're both out. So that basically gets Ben Trebojevic playing at left second row for them. And then their pack is Condon, Fainu, both rookies basically. Lawton, who's been sort of an inconsistent NRL player with injuries and stuff, and then Bullimore, who's actually been reasonable for them, and then Kepi as well in there. Paseka's been playing excellently. Jake Turbo, we know how good he is, and Olapuatu's a star. That Manly team doesn't look great, but I'm worried because the Raiders have won 5 straight. they look excellent. Like I don't think they've lost anyone, or they've lost Wolford to concussion, but Levi's back. I don't think that's a huge loss. And they're leaving Corey Harawira out. So, like, you can see they've won 5 straight. They're full of Tomoko has been excellent, by the way. I think he's either scored a try or got like line breaks. He's gotten 200 running meters 3 weeks in a row. He's just been excellent. So this would be a really interesting game. And if the Raiders can go into the Origin period, 6-0 in their last 6 weeks. The big one will be only Josh Papali should be missing, really. Horsburgh might get a gig on the bench for Queensland, but really, if they're only losing Josh Papali, and then you look at, okay, fine, we'll just bring Corey Harawira in on the bench or whatever, that's not a huge loss. Oh, sorry, it is a huge loss, but they're actually making up for it somewhat. It'll be really interesting if they can make a big run through the Origin period with pretty much a full squad. Let's get straight into it, guys. As always, I spend way too much on the teams. Cool. So firstly, this is footystatistics.com or NRLFantasyStats.com. Excellent resource for all things NRL Fantasy. I'm going to go through this to basically have a look at I think the main 2 things I'm going to look at is like who's hot and who's not. Who's not, Manu, yeah, injury. If you're playing for overall and not, if you're playing for head to head and not overall, he's actually worth a hold. He's dual position. He's going to get games at fullback or 5/8 over the next few rounds. So this is round 12. Round 13 is the Origin affected bye round, and they've got the bye, and he might actually be back the round after in round 14, or most likely the week after that, according to most of the reports like NRL Physio and stuff going around. So with my team, I actually needed to trade him out because I had other cashews that I wanted or whatever. And I'm happy to trade him back in if I want to. But if you are playing for head-to-head, it might actually be worth holding him. Hosking got concussed and he got held back on the bench, I think, last week. So a lot of people panicking there. But again, Liam Martin, yes, he's playing off the bench again, but Hosking might not get his 80 minutes this week. But I think long term, especially if you're a head-to-head player, it's worth holding him, knowing that Martin's most likely going to go off to Origin. Reynolds is missing this week, but he plays next week, and he's like a gun option during Origin. So I don't know why so many people are trading him out. Ford, like I understand why you don't have him because he's got the bye this week, but from next week he's going to be one of the most like in demand buy option, buy options at his price actually. So yeah, McInnes is missing 4 weeks, fair enough. Teddy's been really poor and he's going to be playing Origin, fair enough. Lenny's gone for a while. I'm going to hold off saying what I wanted to, but yeah, he's got a ruptured testicle, unfortunately, so he's going to be out for a little while, and Sloan's been poor. So like most of these make sense. I just think if you're a head-to-head player, be patient with guys like Manu, Hosking, actually, sorry, they're probably the main 2. And if you're an overall player, Ford, like really have a think about whether you could keep him, because if you could, he'd actually be a really good player in your team from next week onwards. Who's hot? So this is going to be the fun. These are going to be the fun plays to discuss. So Harrison Edwards, he looked really good. He scored the first try. Oh no, the first try. Sorry, scored the first try in the second half last week. And he's got really good stats. Doesn't play next week though. So I think a big one to think about here is how are you going for your numbers next week? If you're going well, like personally, I think I've got 10 or 11 people locked in. I'm happy with that, and I'll get a couple more next week if I need to. Then he's a great buy. Like the Dogs pack is pretty stuffed at the moment. He'll keep getting minutes. He scored a try and he's playing well in a team that's struggling. So you know that they're going to keep giving you opportunities. But don't buy him if you're struggling for around 13 numbers. Or you might remember with NRL Fantasy, and I'll go through in a second, you can only have 3 mid scoring for you in round 13 in the bye round. So for example, if you think he's going to fill in for you, I think it's around 16. Do you already have a lot of mids that are playing that round? So just have a think about it, basically. But yeah, it definitely seems like a good option. Billy Smith scored 62 weeks in a row in NRL Fantasy without a try. Like, I think that's just nuts. And one of those weeks was against the Panthers. I just don't see how you don't trade him in. But the decision to make here is if you're low on trades and you're going all right for round 13 numbers, if you're not going all right for round 13 numbers, Edwards and Billy Smith both don't play next round 13, which is the big bye week. So decisions need to be made in terms of like which one of these 2 that you do bring in. On the flip side, I think Lukey's not as much of an obvious buy because he's gone over 500k in NRL Fantasy now, but he plays the next 2 weeks. On the flip side, Tamalolo, I think, is due back. Luciano Lua could be playing soon again, and he's not always going to be scoring 2 tries against pretty crap Dragons team last week. So um, I think out of those, the next one, Ben Trebojevic, um, he's got the left edge second row spot for Manly. So they play next week on the big Y week, which is huge. But they don't play the week after. I think it's Manly, the Knights, and the Eels, I think, that miss out. And a lot of people, if you're playing overall and you're trying to be smart with your buy selections, you're going to have a lot of players from those teams. So just make a decision on, is he the smart way to go? And do you actually need him? There's a forum called NRL Fantasy Fanatics, amazing place to chat all things NRL Fantasy. They actually made a really good point that his base price at the moment at his dual position, and he's now starting in the second row. So on the surface, he seems like an obvious buy. Reality is, though, his break even is actually kind of high. I think it's like 25 or something. So he basically needs to get to 25 just to maintain his price. So you want to see like a big 40 plus score from him to make a little bit of money this round. And if he flops or he doesn't get 80 minutes or whatever, he's kind of stuck in your team. And by the time he actually makes his money, it might only be 50 or 100k, and then he's lost his spot again. So he's one that I'm not personally going to be picking in NRL Fantasy because of that. Because I think like with Lukey, Smith, and Edwards, which they're the 3 that I've traded in actually, there's enough options to make me happy over the next few weeks, and just don't need Ben Trebojevic at the moment. Ponga, so I actually traded him in last week. I was so pumped to watch him, and obviously he did really well, which is amazing. But I don't get why you're trading him in this week. There's Origin next week, and he's got to buy the week after. So even if you're a head-to-head player, it doesn't make too much sense. And if you're an overall player, if you're going to hold him for the rest of the season as like a 17th, 18th man, I get it. But I think it's a little bit silly to trade him off one good score. With him obviously having like concussion risk in Origin, not playing the next couple of rounds. I think that's a little bit silly. Tafari hasn't even been named, so I don't understand why people are going off early on him. Tafari, I think like trade him the next time he's named. There's just no urgency to bring him at the moment. Lemuelu, I get it. He plays next week. He's a forward playing the centers in NRL Fantasy. Excellent pick. I get that. I think this is the worst time to buy Jermaine Hopgood because there is a chance he gets a bench kick for Queensland. So I think that's a silly trade. I don't understand why you'd necessarily be trading Oluwapu. There's clearly like 4 or 3 really good and a couple of other like cash cow options. Why are you trading Oluwapu? If you're an overall player, he doesn't play next week. You should have enough halves going around your team. I just don't understand why people are bringing him in. I don't understand also why people would be bringing like Hines and Haas and stuff like that. Hines, look, he most likely won't make the Origin team, but if he doesn't, then then they've got to buy anyway. So I think that's interesting that people are sort of pulling the trigger on him early. But yeah, it's some interesting decisions here. Most of them make sense, but I think just the trades this week, because there's so many cows, and the buy rounds are so tricky this year, you really do kind of need to think twice about what you're doing with so many options around. Cool. With the stats center, I thought what would be interesting to go through here is to just go through like some of the players that have just lost a ton of money. So I think offhand Gowie, let's talk that he'll go to the Eels. I think he could be like the Eels have the best run over the buys in terms of which games they're playing and stuff. So if he actually does go to the Eels, definitely one that I'll be keeping an eye on. Aside from that, there was Totola. So I bought Totola in last week. He is priced at, I would say, roughly 30 or maybe like 32-ish. And he should be able to average 40 long term. He just had like injuries, a concussion, or maybe even 2 concussions. He's had a really crap start to the year, but a lot of it hasn't been his fault. You bring him in this week with no Tom Burgess. You know that Cam Murray is going to be going off to Origin, so is Cook. So Totola is basically going to be like their senior forward for the next 7-8 weeks, along with Tom Burgess when he's back. I think he's an excellent buy. I know I just said Harrison Edwards and Lukey and all that kind of stuff, but I think the conversation to have is Totola v Lukey. I brought in Totola last week, so I don't need to weigh it up, but I reckon Totola's like 50K or 60K cheaper than Lukey. And with Lukey having like job security issues coming up, like you'll get better buy coverage and more money over the next 9 weeks with Totola. So I reckon Totola over Lukey for sure. But Lukey's like a fun short-term play. But yeah, anyways, I reckon Totola's the way to go. Aside from that, I don't think there's too much more. Like obviously Turbo's most likely playing Origin, so I wouldn't want to go near him. Cool. The other thing that I wanted to do, quick humble brag. Don't know how humble this is, but I'm having a really good season. I think the forum that I'm on, the Fantasy Fanatics forum, I keep saying every time I post, I've played NRL Fantasy for over 10 years, been obsessed with it in the past, like not as much anymore, but yeah, never had a top 100 rank. So this season's been awesome. Last week I was ranked, 145 for the round out of 200,000 people, ranked 78 overall. Obviously, I'm really, really happy with that. I've done 3 trades. Manu, I did say it could be a hold, but he's like my way of getting Hilamuki into my team. All 3 of my trades, I think Edwards doesn't play around 13, but I really wanted him because he looks good. He's going to make money, and he'll play other buy rounds in a dogs pack that definitely has minutes for him to play. Smith, when I noticed he got 62 weeks in a row, and he's playing St George this week, that's just easy money. Easy money we're going to make. And I think in terms of trade outs, Hands is unfortunately he's not going anywhere. He looked good. I thought it'd be like a really smart option, but yeah, he's just not going anywhere. Manu, even if he only misses like a couple of rounds, I think I'll actually get more from Lukey because he's playing those 2 rounds. AKP, he's looked really good, but he's not playing round 13. And Hands is playing round 13, but he's going to get me like 20 points, 30 points. I'd much rather go with these 2 guys who are going to make me a ton of money. Also, when I looked at my 12.9K team value, I realized even though I'm 78th, which I'm really happy about, look at the team value of some of these teams. Like 3.6, 13.6, 13 point. Like all the top teams are around that sort of 13.567. So I'm like $500,000 off all of these really, really good teams. And even if I look at the guys ranked around me, where am I? Like around here, they're all sort of like the best part of $500,000 above me. So yeah, long story short, I've made some how many trades do I have? 13. Oh crap, okay. Well, that's not looking great. But what I'm thinking is with this squad, like I've only really got what is it? Haas, Yo, and Clear is like my locked in I'm sorry, Ponga is like my locked in origin guys. I might trade out 1 or 2 of Cleary, Haas, and Yo. Like I reckon I'll keep Cleary and Haas just because they're just so much better. I know Yo's averaging more than Haas, but I reckon like this weekend actually is really important. Like the Broncos are playing the Panthers. Whichever one of those 2 team wins, it's a 4-point game. In that, it also I'm sure it'll come into the decision of the coaches. Like, do we rest Payne Haas or not? Because obviously the Broncos have Haas and Carrigan. I reckon across the 3 weeks after Origin, Haas might play 2 out of 3 at most. It's just stupid to keep playing him after Origin games off a short turnaround. But anyways, those are some of the decisions that I've got to make. I hope that was helpful aside from just bragging about my team. I think next week, NRL fantasy players, make sure you understand this because I actually was a little bit confused until this morning. So with NRL fantasy for rounds 13, 16, 19 before Origin, you can only play 13 players in their appropriate positions. So if I sub these guys out and brought in like Granville's playing next week, Crossland is, Tafari, hopefully if his name is as well, Host is, Totola is. If I sub these guys in, if you've got, let's say, 3 winger fullbacks, right, and they're all playing next week, but if you've got a 4th winger fullback playing next week on your bench, he can't, his score won't count because you've only got 1 centre. Just remember that. It has to be 13 players in their appropriate positions next week. And I'm saying that because I know Supercoach is different. So perfect segue into Supercoach. I'll very quickly start off with my own team. This isn't so much of a brag. How am I going? Season rank 4,500 out of 150K. I'm still pretty happy with that. Traditionally, I've been pretty crap at Supercoach because NRL Fantasy is like very much more base stats driven, and that's what I'm used to. And with Supercoach, you need to be a bit more ballsy and go with attacking upside guys. And traditionally, I haven't done that. So I'm pretty happy with this because last week I think I had 3.5k round rank, 4.5k season rank, and I went up a couple thousand. If I can kind of nail the next 3-ish weeks, so do a good job this week again, but also nail next week and the week after. So like the buy effect around, I reckon I could sneak into the top 1,000 maybe. And yeah, pretty obviously Edwards and Smith, they're going to make a ton of money this round, and I just don't want to give that up. It does mean trading out Hosking, but I'm happy to do that because he's not going to play next round, and this round he's probably going to have to job share with Martin potentially. So I'm happy to do that, and he's going to lose cash. And Manu, he's not going to play the next 2 rounds this round because of injury, next round because they're on a bye. So like I'm making a ton of money, and I'm not getting any more round 13 players, but I'll be fine. Like I'm okay for numbers with that. Going into some Supercoach stats. So this is pretty obvious. On a lot of these, they're similar to NRL Fantasy. People are trading out Manu, get that. Manu, Hosking, no surprises. The one that is kind of interesting is Alamotti, but he's not playing next week, so I can't really blame you. CNK is on his bye, but he's an amazing player throughout the bye rounds. So I think he's actually a good center wing pick, especially. So very interested to see. Sorry, why the hell did anyone have Max Guy? Maybe that's why I'm not as good as Supercoach. I missed him completely. But anyways, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's the guy that's not in the team anymore. So it's cool. He's the center. So I think Matt's the winger. So Ford and Shans, I get that they're on the bye, but I think they're both holds unless like you had to get rid of them for like a Lukey or a Billy Smith, which I assume is happening with a lot of people here. Turbo, Teddy, I get it. They're leaking so much money, and it's not like, oh, actually, Teddy's leaked a ton of money, and Turbo is not in great form, and most likely gone off to Origin. So I get that. Wow, Reynolds. Ooh, I might actually look at him as a trading option. He lost 88.5k last week. That's nuts. Like I get it. It was because of the concussion. I wish he did play this week because he would have dropped a bit more, but that's all right. Traded in. Yeah, well, I'm obviously going with the majority of the coaches here and going Smith and Edwards for the most cash. I get that. Can't talk anyone out of that. Garrick, I think, is smart. Gets 1 week, one last crack with Manly to have a win before Origin, and then after that, he'll be the fullback, so he'll be even more involved. Tapina as well, fully get that. 80k off his starting price. He'll have an enhanced role during Origin, dual position. Doesn't play round 13. Oh, no, he does. I think he does play around 10. Yeah, excellent pickup here. That's cool. Trebojevic, I think in Supercoach, he's actually like a decent pickup because he's put on a little bit of money because he got try assist last week. You can play him in the centers. He's starting. Yeah, long story short, I think he's an okay pickup in Supercoach. Ponga, again, I think is stupid. He's going to miss the next 2 rounds for you. I don't get the point of buying him just now. Lukey, fully understand why people will trade him in. Hopgood, I think you wait to see if he makes Origin or not. No point trading him in. He scored the first try last week, so obviously jumped up in price. I get that. But if you trade him in, and yeah, you might make 30, 40, 50k, whatever it is, but then he gets picked on the bench for Origin, that's just a waste of a trade. And yeah, like fully get why people would trade Marshall King in. And Tafari, again, just wait, wait till his name to start. Cool. Let's move on. That's it, I guess, for Supercoach. But I do want to go through some other stuff for Supercoach. I just didn't have it up here. It's the captaincy stuff. There we go. That's it. Yes. So let's see if these numbers are right. So 38% Hines. Yeah, they seem fine. Oh, like how good's David Fafita been this year in real life and also stats wise? Put on 200k in Supercoach. Absolutely ridiculous. Scored a runaway try and a barge over try. He's an absolute beast. New South Wales fans will be hoping he doesn't get named, obviously, for Queensland. But I think aside from that, there was, I think, I think that's it for Supercoach. There wasn't too much. One thing that I did want to say, I'll just clarify for people because I usually spend a lot more time on NRL Fantasy, but with Supercoach, I know it's different. So what I've heard, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I've heard with Supercoach is that for the bye rounds 13, 16, 19, you can select 17 players as you do every week, but your best 13 count to your highest scoring 13 count to your score. So that's a little bit different, obviously, to NRL Fantasy, where it's just like 13 people, you have to put them in your starting 13, and that's it. And you can't have more than one of every, more than, like, sorry, you have to have them in the right positions. But with Supercoach, it's put 17 players, like, select them, and we'll select your highest 13 for you, which is pretty cool, I thought. So that'll be really interesting to see how people navigate around that. But anyways, guys, I think that's it for me this week. From next week, I'm going to try to collaborate a little bit with other guys from NRL, like the NRL Fantasy and Supercoach space. If you've got any questions, as always, just join our Discord. We've got a Fantasy and Supercoach channel. We can answer, like, we can help you out with who you want to trade in and out, and also any questions and stuff around the buys, because it's going to take a lot of planning this year because it's bloody chaos. But aside from that, enjoy the footy. Last round of full NRL, like with no origin distractions and stuff for a little while. So all the best, and good luck with the teams.